Marcus Hale rose early, before dawn's first light. He moved quietly through his rented apartment, careful not to wake his roommate. The small kitchen smelled faintly of last night's coffee, and Hale paused by the window to look out at the sleepy city. He had lived here for 2 months now, ever since the FBI sent him undercover to gather proof of corruption in the local police force. He liked to think he understood the city's moods, sometimes calm, sometimes tense, but never simple. He dressed in plain clothes, choosing a dark jacket and jeans that would let him blend in. On his belt, he hung a small recorder and a digital camera concealed in a pen. He checked his watch. 5:30 a.m. He had until the team arrived for the morning briefing. In his mind, he ran through the plan once more. Tonight's raid could be the most important of his career. If he got the evidence, it would expose officers who planted false drugs on innocent people, men who had forgotten their duty to protect and serve. Outside, the streets were quiet. Few streetlights still glowed, the empty sidewalks holding the promise of a new day. Marcus Hale felt a familiar knot of tension in his chest. He did this work because he believed in fairness. He believed in rules, in honesty. He believed that police officers should be held to a higher standard because they carried the badge that spoke for all of us. And he knew that in this city, too many officers had grown careless, even cruel. At the station's back door, Hale slipped inside just as the other agents arrived. They piled into a rundown office where the walls were lined with maps and photos tacked to corkboards. Hale stood at the back, listening as his team leader, Agent Ramirez, spoke in low tones. They would move on a house where they believed officers. Planted drugs on a man named Johnson, a local preacher's helper. Johnson had spent months in jail, facing charges he never should have seen. The proof of his innocence lay hidden in police reports and crime lab files, but someone had altered the files. Hall needed to find the truth. Ramirez glanced at Hale and nodded. Marcus slipped out the back, circling around to the house on Maple Street. The area was known for its old brick homes with cracked sidewalks and front yards full of overgrown grass. Neighbors would see lights and hear noise tonight, but they knew little of police raids. They might think it was business as usual, and they would be wrong. Inside the precinct, Chief Roland Jacobs studied files at his desk. He was a tall man, with broad shoulders and a firm jaw. His uniform hung crisp on the chair's back, but he wore his badge more like a shield. Believed strongly in tough policing. Believed the FBI agents who came down from Washington were meddling outsiders. He thought they did not understand the realities of fighting crime here. Jacobs rubbed his temples and reached for another coffee cup. He had heard rumors of a raid tonight and suspected it might involve federal agents sneaking around to catch his men doing wrong. Anger pulsed in him. He had built his career in this city, rising through the ranks by showing he would not back down on crime. He would not tolerate threats to his officers. As night fell, the city glowed with street lamps and neon signs. A few cars passed on Maple Street. Hale crouched behind a hedge across from the target house. His hands felt calm but focused. He clicked his recorder on and slipped a small pinhole camera into the fence's wood grain. Through his lens, he watched officers in black uniforms move around, knocking on the front door. He held his breath. He needed clear footage of them planting a bag of white powder. That bag could clear Johnson's name. Inside the house, too. Detectives whispered in the hallway. One carried the bag. They left a trail of footprints in the muddy yard. Then they stepped back into their SUV and drove off. Hale watched the taillights fade. He slipped the pen camera into his pocket. Turned to leave, but then a siren wailed in the distance. He risked stepping into the street to check the time on his watch. It read 10:02 p.m. He had to get back to the hotel and upload the footage, but as he moved, bright floodlights snapped on. A squad car pulled up beside him, lights flashing in his face. "Hey you," an officer shouted. Hale froze, hands up. 2 other officers piled out of the car. They wore the city's dark blue uniform, thick belts, heavy with gear. Their badges glinted. One had a nameplate. Pike. He looked tense, eyes narrowed. His partner Davis stepped forward, hand on his holster. Hale tried to speak, but his throat felt dry. "I'm sorry," he said. "I must have the wrong person." Pike didn't lower his gun. "Step away from the fence, hands where we can see them." He barked orders with a cool, hard edge. His partner scanned Hale's jacket and jeans. Pike's gaze flicked to the fence, then to the empty lot next door. Hale slowed his breathing. He thought, "This is wrong. I'm not the suspect." But they did not listen. Pike's finger was on the trigger. A red dot from a rifle scope landed on Hale's chest. It was Jacobs' special tactics squad trained to stop threats with no warning. Pike called out, "Move." Hale took one step and Pike fired. The shot echoed off the houses. Hale felt a burning pain in his left shoulder, hot and sharp. He dropped to the ground as more shots rang out. The world spun around him. He heard Pike's voice, harsh and urgent. "He shot at us. Return fire." Hale could not move. He lay in the grass. Bright lights above him, faces blurred. He thought, "They think I'm the enemy." His heart pounded. He heard a voice far away, saying his name. The next thing he knew, he was waking up in a hospital bed. Tubes everywhere, machines beeping. He was still in shock, his body broken. He learned later that 2 officers had fired 9 rounds. They said they felt threatened. They said he aimed a gun at them. Their story would be their shield. But Marcus knew he had no gun. He was an FBI agent, not a wanted criminal. He had suffered 2 gunshot wounds and a concussion. He lay in that bed feeling both relief and anger. Relief that he was alive. Anger that his brothers in blue could shoot him down without a second thought. Back at the station, Chief Jacobs held a news conference early the next morning. He spoke of a dangerous intruder who opened fire on police officers. He praised Pike and Davis as heroes. On television, people nodded and believed him. The city woke to stories of a rogue shooter on Maple Street, not of an innocent agent gunned down at point-blank range. Marcus watched the conference on a small TV in his hospital room. He felt his chest tighten. He knew the true story would have to come out, but he also knew how hard it would be. The police force had a tight circle. They protected their own. His partner, Agent Ramirez, visited him later that day. She brought the recorder and small files. She had copies of surveillance footage from a neighbor's doorbell camera showing the officers arriving. She had a clear shot of Pike's finger on the trigger. "We've got what we need," Ramirez said, voice soft but determined. "You rest and heal. We'll handle the rest." Marcus nodded, too tired to speak. But inside, a fire burned. He would not back down. He would make sure the truth came out. He would show that racism and fear could not justify a man's attempt to kill someone far weaker and much farther from home. He would not let the city forget his name or the way they tried to write him off as a criminal. The nurse adjusted his pillow, and Marcus closed his eyes. Even as pain pulsed through his body, he felt hope. In this battle, he had only just begun. He woke to a bright light in his room. The beeping machines had changed, the steady pulse now slower, more regular. He knew he was alive. For a moment, he felt relief wash over him. Then pain came, sharp and insistent. He tried to move his arm and saw his sleeve stained red. A nurse hurried to his side, soothing him with calm words while adjusting his fore. Marcus closed his eyes. He did not want to remember the shooting again, but his mind raced with it anyway. Later, his partner, Agent Ramirez, came in with a stack of papers. She laid out the recorder transcripts and photographs of the fence where he had hidden. She had labored late into the night, working with the lab techs to enhance the footage. On the tiny screen of her laptop, Marcus saw images of his shooting, though the police reports claimed a different story. Ramirez pointed to a frame where Officer Pike raised his rifle. His finger tightened on the trigger. Marcus winced. Still felt every moment. Word of the shooting spread fast. Local TV stations interviewed police spokespeople who called the incident a tragic mistake. Newspapers printed headlines blaming an unknown assailant. No one thought to question the police version. Many people in the city trusted the badge more than an outsider from Washington. Marcus listened to the reports and felt anger rise. Inside him, how could they rewrite the story so easily? How could they ignore what he knew to be true? That afternoon, agents from FBI headquarters arrived. They moved in with formal manners and earnest voices. Marcus met with the lead investigator, a woman named Agent Lowe. She asked him to recount every detail, his words slow because of the pain. She took notes as he spoke about plainclothes, hidden cameras, the knock at midnight, the floodlights, and the shots. Her eyes narrowed with concern when he told her they had fired 9 times. "They said you aimed at them," he reminded her. Agent Lowe tapped her pen. "We will see," she said. "We will find the truth." In his hospital bed, Marcus stared at the ceiling fan, turning in lazy circles. He thought of his childhood friend Jamal, who had joined the police force years ago and believed in justice. He thought of his mother, who had taught him to stand up for what was right. Now he lay here, wounded badly, while the officers who shot him drove around free, still in uniform. He wondered if he could trust the system. He wondered if justice was only for those who already held power. As days passed, more evidence came in. A local crime lab found fingerprints on the planted bag that did not belong to Johnson. Several neighbors came forward with video from doorbell cameras showing the detectives planting evidence. An internal police memo surfaced in which Chief Jacobs complained about that meddling federal agent. Still, the police union rallied behind the officers. They held a rally downtown where they praised Pike and Davis as heroes who protected the city. Politicians joined them on stage, smiling and shaking hands. Marcus watched images of the event on his phone. He felt as if the city celebrated his shooting. Lawyers met him one evening, voices low in the visiting room. They warned him that the district attorney might refuse to press charges against the officers. They said the local judge was known for siding with law enforcement. They cautioned him that the same fear and bias that led to the shooting could now twist the law against him. Marcus clenched his fists. "Then we fight," he said. "To show them the evidence. We speak louder." His lawyer nodded. "We will do everything we can," she promised, though her eyes showed she knew how hard it would be. Meanwhile, media attention grew. A few national outlets ran stories questioning the police account. One online reporter dug up the recorder transcripts and played clips of Pike's unit planning the raid without federal presence. Comments flooded, and some praised Marcus as a brave whistleblower. Others called him a traitor, but did not let them touch him. He had faced danger before in undercover work. What shook him now was the idea that his own countrymen could believe lies so easily. In the hospital courtyard, Marcus sat in a wheelchair under a gray sky. Ramirez wheeled him along the brick path. She spoke softly about the next steps. A formal complaint, possible federal civil rights charges, and an appeal for a special prosecutor. She told him to rest, to heal. But Marcus looked ahead at the bare trees and said, "I want to go home. I want to see my own bed." Ramirez stopped the chair. "Maybe soon," she said. He nodded, though he knew his scars ran deeper than the wounds in his shoulder. That night, he could not sleep. He closed his eyes and saw the rifles flash, heard the echo of gunshots. He waited for silence, but his thoughts were noisy. He thought about what he would tell his children one day. He thought about the meaning of his work. He thought of justice as a scale, unbalanced now. But he also thought of balance returning. He believed one day he would stand in a courtroom and tell the truth while everyone listened. For now he rested, gathering strength for the battle ahead. He whispered to himself, "They will know what really happened." And in the quiet room, under the hum of machines, Marcus Hale began to plan. Marcus Hale left the hospital with a brace on his shoulder and a cane in his hand. He moved slowly down the sidewalk, flanked by Agent Ramirez on one side and his lawyer, Ms. Carter, on the other. The sun was warm on their backs, but Marcus felt a chill in his chest. He was free to go home, but he knew the hardest work lay ahead. Back at his small rental house, Marcus found it almost empty. Packing boxes lined the living room. He had planned to stay only a few weeks in this city, but the shooting changed everything. He sank into the couch and closed his eyes. Memories of the raid came back in flashes: the knock, the floodlights, the sudden blast of fear. He breathed in and out, steadying himself. Tonight he would sleep. Tomorrow he would begin to fight. The next morning began with the ring of his phone. It was Agent Lowe from headquarters. She had news. Special federal inquiry would open in 2 days. "We have jurisdiction on civil rights," she said. "That means we can investigate the officers for misuse of force. We will need your full testimony." Marcus felt hope. He stood, wincing as he moved his arm. "I'm ready," he said. "Whatever you need." Over the next days, Marcus met with prosecutors, civil rights investigators, and forensic experts. He answered questions in conference rooms, his voice calm even when his body still ached. He described the recording, the camera, the planted drugs, the false testimony from the detectives. He described the pain of being shot by men who wore the same uniform he once respected. Each account chipped away at the shield that the local police had built around themselves. Meanwhile, Chief Jacobs and his inner circle fought back. They held news conferences in front of the station. They called the federal inquiry an attack on local law enforcement. They painted Marcus as a careless agent who had put officers in danger. Pike and Davis, the shooting officers, spoke to sympathetic reporters. They said they feared for their lives. They said that in the dark of night, they could not see his badge. They said he moved too fast. Their words echoed in the city's headlines. On social media, arguments flared. Some people rallied behind the officers, calling them brave heroes. Others rallied behind Marcus, calling for justice. The debate split neighbors and friends. Marcus watched the posts, trying not to read every hateful comment. He reminded himself that truth mattered more than every angry message. He reminded himself that real change began not in the comments but in the courtroom. 2 weeks after leaving the hospital, Marcus returned to the house on Maple Street. It was cordoned off now with yellow tape, investigators in suits and gloves. Walked through the yard. They dusted for fingerprints, took soil samples, and photographed every board and fence post. Marcus stood at the edge of the tape. He felt hollow. This was the place where his life changed forever. He touched the tape and looked across at the house's dark windows. Inside, evidence of the planting sat in boxes on the porch. He wondered how many innocent people suffered similar fates. How many had no federal agent to help them? No recorder hidden in a pen. Ramirez joined him at the tape line.
Ow.
She handed him a fresh cup of coffee. He took a sip, bitter on his tongue. "What do we have?" he asked. She showed him new lab reports confirming that the bag the detectives planted had no residue matching Johnson's prints. She showed him time-stamped text messages between Jacobs and the officers, where Jacobs said, "Don't let that FBI agent slow you down." Marcus nodded, absorbing each fact. He thought, the truth is strong. It will hold up in court. Soon, the hearing date arrived. Marcus sat at the witness table in a large courtroom. His heart pounded as lawyers filed documents, and a judge took his seat. On one side sat the federal prosecutor, Mr. Sanders.com, and prepared. On the other side sat the defense team for the city police. They had glossy binders and confident smiles. Behind them sat Pike and Davis in suits, not uniforms. Watching Marcus as though he were already guilty, the judge called the hearing to order. First, Mr. Sanders stood and laid out the case. Civil rights violation by excessive force, racial bias, and a cover-up. He spoke of the tape recorder, the false statements, and the pattern of misconduct. He said that Marcus, an undercover agent, dressed as a civilian, deserved protection under federal law. He said the officer's actions broke that law and harmed not only Marcus, but the public's trust. Then the defense attorney, Ms. Franklin, rose. She spoke of the dangers of police work, the split-second decisions officers make in fear for their lives. She questioned Marcus's judgment, suggesting he had acted recklessly by hiding among the shadows. She argued that he could have revealed himself more clearly or notified the department before planting cameras. She said the officers did what they had to do. Marcus felt his face grow hot. He wanted to stand and shout that he had followed every rule, that he had done everything he could to avoid violence. But he remained seated, listening as Ms. Franklin described him as a meddling outsider. Her words stung, but he held steady. He knew his time to speak would come. When it was his turn, Marcus rose slowly, cane in one hand, leaned into the microphone and cleared his throat. He spoke plainly in the same calm voice he used in training rooms and surveillance meetings. He described how he prepared, how he recorded the evidence, how he never once intended to harm an officer. He told the court that he stepped into the street only after the planting was done. He described the flash of the rifle muzzle, the pain that exploded in his shoulder, and the moment he realized his life was in grave danger, he ended by saying, "I did my duty to protect the public. These officers failed their duty to protect me." A hush fell over the courtroom. Even the defense lawyers looked down. The weight of his words hung in the air. The judge nodded and called for a brief recess. In the hall outside, Marcus sat on a bench while his legal team huddled around him. He closed his eyes, trying to remember why he fought for justice. He felt a swell of pride mixed with fear. He had faced danger in undercover work before. He had faced threats from criminals. But this felt different. It was his own government. That had turned on him. After the recess, witnesses testified. A neighbor spoke of hearing footsteps in the yard that didn't match any suspect description. Forensic expert explained blood spatter patterns inconsistent with a struggling shootout. Another FBI agent described standard protocol for meetings between federal and local law enforcement. It's protocol that Jacobs' team ignored. Each witness added another piece to the puzzle. When the hearing concluded, both sides made closing statements. Mr. Sanders spoke of justice, fairness, and accountability. He asked the judge to move the case forward to a federal grand jury. Ms. Franklin warned against undermining local policing, saying that agencies must trust one another to fight crime. Yes. She asked the judge to dismiss the charges. The judge listened. Carefully, he spoke softly but firmly. He said that the evidence presented gave serious cause to proceed. He would send the case to a grand jury for potential indictments of the officers. He reminded both sides that justice required facts, not fear or bias. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed and microphones thrust forward. Marcus stepped into the light. Reporters shouted questions. "How do you feel? You think justice will prevail?" He paused, then said, "I believe in our system. It will do what is right." Did not add more, did not celebrate. He simply walked back to the car, cane clicking on the pavement. Back at home, Marcus sat at his desk. He opened a letter from his mother. She wrote that she prayed for him every day. She believed in his strength and in the God of justice.
Alice
Held the letter to his chest. He let a quiet hope grow inside him. The fight was far from over, but he had taken the first steps. He had spoken his truth. Others had seen it. He would continue to stand for fairness, no matter how long the road, and deep in his heart, Marcus knew that even if the world turned against him, the truth would never be silent. It would rise up, strong as the first light of dawn, and show the way for those who believed in justice. Marcus woke early on the day of his trial. Light seeped through the thin curtains of his bedroom. His shoulder ached, but he forced himself out of bed. He dressed carefully in a dark suit and tie. The suit felt stiff, but it gave him a sense of strength. He looked in the mirror at his own reflection. He saw tired eyes, but also a steady resolve. He would face the court today. Agent Ramirez arrived first. She offered him a small smile as he climbed into the car. She drove with quiet focus, letting Marcus gather his thoughts. Neither spoke much. In the back of his mind, he thought of every step that had led to this moment. The undercover work, the night in the hedge, the flash of the rifle, long hours. In the hospital, the months of fighting for the truth. Now once again, he would stand before strangers to tell his story. When they reached the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Reporters jostled for position. Cameras pointed like silent witnesses. Marcus felt a flutter in his chest. He took a steadying breath. Ramirez gave him a nod. They entered through the side door, away from the press. Inside, the courtroom was full. Family members sat behind him, including his mother and his old friend Jamal, now a detective in another city. A few FBI agents filled the seats to one side. On the other side sat the officers from the raid pike and Davis wearing civilian clothes, their faces solemn. Chief Jacobs sat behind them. Marcus's eyes met Jacobs's for a moment. He saw no sign of regret, only a cold determination. The judge called the court to order. Marcus stood with Ramirez by his side. He watched as the prosecutor, Mr. Sanders, laid out the charges: excessive use of force, deprivation of rights under color of law, and conspiracy to cover up the crime. He spoke calmly, listing the evidence, the recorder's audio, the camera. footage, the lab reports, and the conflicting officer statements. He said Marcus had been doing his duty to expose wrongdoing. But the officers had broken the law by shooting him without cause and then lying about it. When the defense attorney, Miss Franklin, spoke, her tone was polite but firm. She described her clients as dedicated officers who had faced danger every day. She argued they believed they were under threat. She questioned Marcus's actions. Why had he concealed his identity? Why had he entered their operation without warning? She suggested he had acted recklessly, causing confusion. She asked the jury to consider the officer's fear and split-second thinking. As the trial moved to witness testimony, Marcus felt his heart pound. First came the fellow agent who had helped plan the raid. He explained the coordination between the FBI and local police, how federal law required certain notifications, and how no such notice had been given. He spoke of training, of protocols meant to keep agents safe. His clear words made it hard to deny that Marcus had followed proper steps. Next, a forensic expert described the trajectory of the bullets and the blood patterns. He showed diagrams that matched Marcus's account. Shots fired from a distance, no sign of struggle or exchange of fire. He testified that Marcus's injuries were inconsistent with a scenario in which he had brandished a weapon. The jury watched the slides quietly, absorbing each detail. Then came the neighbor who had seen the detectives plant evidence. She spoke, with a trembling voice, recalling the detectives carrying a small bag and gently placing it near the window. She said she had been afraid to speak at first, but the sight of her quiet street turned against her conscience. She described her surprise when she later saw the news blaming a shooter. Marcus listened silently, grateful for her courage. When the officers themselves took the stand, Pike spoke first. He said he thought he saw a weapon in Marcus's hand, he said. He feared for his partner's life and his own. Davis agreed. Their voices were steady, but they sounded practiced, as though they had rehearsed every line. Marcus watched them from the witness box. He thought of that moment in the yard, the bright floodlight, the sudden shout, the red dot moving across. His coat? He thought of the panic he felt, the absence of any chance to speak. He realized how easy it was for fear to turn a man's hand toward the trigger. His turn arrived. He rose slowly, leaning on his cane, felt his mother's eyes on him from the back of the courtroom, took a breath, and spoke in his clear, calm voice. He described his purpose, to gather evidence of injustice. He described the night's events step by step. He told the jury he had no weapon, only a recorder and a camera. He said he had shown no threat. He told them what he felt when the shot tore into his body, shock, disbelief, a sense that his own countrymen had tried to kill him. Paused, remembering the pain, but he held firm. He ended by saying he wanted the court to remember that every man deserves protection under the law, especially those sworn to serve others. After closing arguments, the jury left to deliberate. Marcus returned to his seat. His body ached, but his mind raced. He thought of every piece of evidence. He thought of the neighbor's courage, the expert's truth, the tape that held the officers' own voices. He believed in the strength of facts, yet he knew how fear and bias could twist the mind. Hours passed. The presiding judge called a brief recess, but the jury did not return. Marcus felt cold sweat on his neck. Ramirez whispered words of support. His mother held his hand. Jamal placed a comforting arm around his shoulders. They all waited. In the afternoon, the judge summoned everyone back. The jury filed in, eyes downcast. The judge read the verdict. Pike was found not guilty on most counts, guilty only of a minor violation for failing to follow protocol. Davis was acquitted entirely. The judge explained that the jury believed the officers acted reasonably under perceived threat. A hush fell over the courtroom. Marcus felt as if the world had tilted beneath him. His heart pounded. He heard his mother gasp. He saw tears in Ramirez's eyes. He wanted to speak, to protest, to tell them all the truth again, but he remained seated. The judge then handed down the sentence for Pike, a small fine and probation. For Davis, nothing. No prison time, no serious punishment. After the gavel fell, chaos erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Family and friends tried to console Marcus. He arose, swaying unsteadily. Jamal helped him toward the exit. Marcus felt the weight of failure settle on his shoulders. He remembered his mother's prayer for justice. He prayed silently now, not for himself, but for the promise of fairness in the future. Outside, the sun was low. Cameras flashed. Reporters asked, "Agent Hale, what do you think?" He paused, his mind reaching for words. Then he said, "I respect the jury's decision. I believe truth matters more than any verdict. I will continue my work." He sounded calm, but inside his chest, a storm raged. Back at his home, Marcus sat at his desk. He looked at the photos of his children and his mother's letter. He felt the ache of disappointment, but also a spark of determination. He knew this was not the end. He knew his fight for justice would take other forms. He would appeal the decision, pursue civil lawsuits, push for policy reforms. He would share his story with the world. That night, Marcus wrote in his journal. He wrote of the trial, of the verdict, of the lessons he learned. He wrote of the power of fear, the importance of truth, and the resilience of the human spirit. He ended with a promise to himself: "I will not let this defeat me. I will use every tool I have to make sure no one else suffers like I did." As he closed the journal, Marcus looked at the dark sky through his window. Stars shone faintly above the city skyline. He thought of dawn yet to come. He felt pain in his shoulder, but he also felt a quiet strength growing inside him. He believed that even a harsh sentence could not silence the truth. He believed that tomorrow he would stand again stronger, wiser, more determined. And so Marcus Hale lay down to sleep, ready to carry on the fight for justice, no matter how long it took. Marcus Hale woke early before his alarm. The trial's verdict still weighed on him, but he refused to stay down. He dressed in a simple shirt and jeans. His shoulder was still stiff, but he could manage a small smile. Today was the day he would file his appeal. In the kitchen, he poured coffee into a sturdy mug. He looked at the papers spread on the table: appeal documents, witness affidavits, media transcripts. Agent Ramirez joined him with her own coffee and a determined look. She slid a folder across to him. "We have new evidence," she said. The neighbor agreed to testify again, this time under oath, and we have her notarized statement. Plus, one of the officers who covered up the planting changed his mind. He wants to come forward. Marcus blinked. His chest tightened with hope. "He's willing to tell the grand jury?" he asked. "Yes." He said he couldn't live with the lie. Marcus folded the papers carefully, felt courage rise inside him. After months of setbacks, he finally had new allies. That afternoon, they met with his civil rights lawyer, Ms. Carter. She sat at a conference table in a sunlit office. She laid out their strategy: submit the new witness statement, request a grand jury review, and push for charges against the officers who covered up the planting. She also planned to file a civil suit for damages, holding the city accountable. Marcus listened, grateful for her clear plan. He asked questions about timelines and potential obstacles. Every answer built his confidence. News of the appeal and new evidence reached local outlets. Journalists wrote articles citing the recanted testimony and the renewed push for justice. One TV station interviewed Marcus's mother outside his home. She spoke of her son's bravery and her belief in truth. People watched her thin, proud face and felt moved. Soon, protesters gathered at the courthouse steps, holding signs that said, "Justice for Agent Hale and no one above the law." Their voices carried across the plaza, steady and hopeful. In the busy courtroom, the judge reviewed the appeal request. He noted the new statement and the sworn testimony from the former cover-up officer. He agreed to convene a grand jury to consider fresh charges. As Marcus left the building, he felt a burst of relief. He walked out into the afternoon sun, breathing deeply. He knew the fight was not over, but he also knew the tide was turning. Over the next weeks, the grand jury convened in a private room. Marcus watched from the gallery as prosecutors called witnesses. First, the neighbor spoke again, this time in a formal setting, repeating her account of seeing the planting. Then, the former detective who admitted his role in the cover-up took the stand. He spoke with a quiet voice, saying he had lied out of fear for his job and loyalty to Chief Jacobs. He said he regretted every false word. His honesty made a strong impression on the jurors. Finally, Marcus himself testified before the grand jury. He told his story simply and clearly. He described the pain he felt, not just in his body, but in his faith in the system. He spoke of the cameras and the recorder, the planting of evidence, and the shooting. He spoke of the cover-up and the lies that followed. His words were measured and sincere. When he finished, a hush filled the room. He nodded to the jurors, who looked at him with respect. A few days later, the grand jury returned an indictment. They charged Officer Pike with excessive use of force and filing false reports. They charged Chief Jacobs and 2 other detectives with conspiracy to obstruct justice. The news spread quickly. Headlines read, "Grand jury indicts police and FBI agent shooting, and justice stepped forward for Marcus Hale." Marcus felt his heart pound with a mix of relief and gravity. He knew indictment did not guarantee conviction, but it was a crucial step. The case moved back to court for preliminary hearings. This time, public opinion had shifted. Many citizens who once sided with the police now demanded accountability. Local leaders called for reform in the police department. They spoke of better training, clearer protocols with federal agents, and stronger oversight. The city council formed a special committee to review police practices. Marcus watched these changes with cautious optimism. At home, Marcus found moments of quiet. He sat on his porch in the evening, drinking tea and watching the sunset paint the sky in pink and orange. He thought of the long road ahead. There would be more hearings, more testimonies, and more news cycles. But he felt strength in knowing that truth cannot stay hidden forever. He thought of his children, who would learn about his fight. He hoped they would carry forward the lessons of courage and integrity. Months later, the trial for Pike, Jacobs, and the other officers began. It was a solemn affair in a packed courtroom. Pike faced charges for shooting without justification and lying in his report. Jacobs faced charges for instructing the planting of evidence and covering up the crime. Other detectives faced similar counts. The prosecution presented the same evidence as before, now bolstered by the recanted statements and independent reviews. The defense tried to argue fear and procedure, but their case felt weaker under the weight of truth. After days of testimony and cross-examinations, the jury reached a verdict. Pike was found guilty of excessive force and false reporting. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Chief Jacobs was found guilty of conspiracy and obstruction of justice. He received 5 years. The other officers received shorter sentences, or probation, depending on their level of involvement. When the sentences were read, a hush fell over the courtroom. Marcus felt tears well in his eyes as he watched justice unfold. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions. The crowd cheered as Marcus stepped out. He stood with his lawyer and Agent Ramirez. Someone handed him a megaphone. He raised it and said, "Today justice was served not just for me, but for everyone who has suffered from unchecked power. Thank you to those who stood with me and to the jurors who set the record straight. This is proof that truth and courage can change our world." His voice echoed across the plaza. People applauded, some wiping tears, others nodding in agreement. In the following months, the city implemented reforms. New policies required joint training for federal and local law enforcement. Officers received education on civil rights and bias. An independent review board was set up to handle complaints. Marcus watched these changes as they took effect. He felt a sense of pride and relief. He had turned his own tragedy into a force for positive change. One sunny afternoon, Marcus held a small ceremony outside the precinct. He spoke alongside community, leaders, and young recruits. He spoke of duty, honor, and service. He urged the new officers to remember they served the people, not themselves. He shared his story, not to condemn every badge, but to remind everyone that courage must win over fear. Later, in a quiet corner of his home, Marcus placed a framed photo of the neighbor who first spoke the truth. He placed another of the former detective who recanted his lie. He thought of all the honest people who helped him. He felt gratitude for their bravery. He also thought of himself and how he nearly lost faith. But he realized he had found faith again, faith in justice, faith in people, and faith in himself. As evening fell, Marcus sat on his porch once more. The air was calm and warm. Fireflies danced in the garden. He closed his eyes and remembered the pain of that night on Maple Street. He felt a soft peace now, knowing that his wounds had led to something good. He thought of justice as a slow river, strong enough to carve through mountains if given time. He whispered softly, "Thank you for guiding me," though he did not know if anyone heard. He sipped his tea and smiled. He knew the world was not perfect and that many battles remained. But he also knew one man's truth could shine a light into the darkest corners. And with that thought, he watched the sky grow dark, confident that tomorrow would bring its own dawn.